Hustle culture told you that rest means laziness, and that was a lie. Rest is how top performers stay sharp. And if you're like most ambitious people, even the thought of slowing down feels like you're falling behind. But it's that mindset that's what's been keeping you behind. So stillness isn't weakness. It is your competitive edge. Now, before we get into how to be still, we need to be real for a second. Because the thought of it sounds simple, but if it was really that simple, everyone would be doing it, right? So why is it so hard for someone like you to just slow down? That's exactly where we need to start. Because until, you really get into what's driving that guilt, you'll keep calling it ambition when deep down, it's really just fear disguised and dressed up as hustle. You'll always be reaching for the next thing. And the craziest part in all of this, you don't really know how to stop because the second you try, your mind starts racing. Your chest gets tight. And something inside you quietly whispers, keep going or you'll fall behind. But here's the thing. That voice isn't actually called ambition. It's really just addiction. And I myself used to call it passion because I thought that I couldn't slow down because I had things to build. But deep down, I was just afraid of what I would feel if I ever got still and really quiet because I didn't know what thoughts would come to my mind. And most people aren't actually afraid of slowing down. They're afraid of what they might feel when everything gets quiet. Because when you're still, it doesn't just pause your body, it brings up the thoughts that you've been trying not to think about. So the guilt you haven't really processed, the loneliness that you've buried under all that ambition, the questions that you're too scared to ask, that's what makes stillness so unsafe. Not because it's actually like dangerous or anything, but it's because it's so damn honest. And the messed up part in all of this is that the moment you slow down, your brain completely freaks out. Like it starts saying into your head that you're being lazy or you don't even deserve rest. And just like that, you're back into the motion because you've been wired to see stillness as a threat. And every time you grind harder, overthink, or say yes, even when you really want to just pause, you're feeding that loop. It's pretty much like survival mode. And most people don't even know that they're trapped inside of it. But you're not most people. So here are 3 things you can implement to start breaking that loop. So the first thing we need to get straight is to reframe stillness as your strategic power. Because you got to realize that stillness isn't about zoning out or running away from responsibilities, and is not some like woo-woo moment where you can just check out of life. It's about presence. And real stillness, that's what high performers actually use to reset. Because instead of like just reacting on impulse, they're responding with intention on their own terms. So with the top performers, they don't just grind nonstop. They know how to hit pause when it counts. Because the power doesn't come from doing more for the sake of doing more. It comes from knowing exactly when to move and when to pause and when not to move. So you need to train your nervous system to stop chasing survival mode and start choosing real calmness. And you can think about it like this. If your mind is always loud, your decisions are always scattered, you're not thinking clearly. But when you can sit still in silence and you can hold your ground, that's where the real mastery begins. Because in the world that we live in, everything is always in motion. And being able to slow down on purpose is not a soft move. It's what separates the real greats. And you can use Nelson Mandela as an example. So during those 27 years that he was in prison, especially the 18 years that he spent in Robben Island, he was stripped of everything. His freedom, his power, his voice. So at first, the stillness, it kind of felt like punishment. He went from a life filled with activism and constantly moving to being forced in isolation. But over time, something started to shift because he started to reframe stillness, and he realized that, it wasn't just the absence of movement or influence. It was almost like an opening somewhere, a chance to build real inner clarity, to sharpen his discipline, and to strengthen essentially his emotional core. Because he didn't use that quiet to shut down or to give up. He actually used it to reflect. So he studied his enemies. He turned all that pain into something that was real purposeful. And even in his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, this is what he wrote. I came out mature. I came out more controlled. I came out more willing to listen to others and to consider what they had to say. I came out a better man. So with that shift, stillness became his training ground. So instead of letting him break him, he used it to build patience and empathy and overall just strategy. And by the time he walked out of prison, he wasn't the same man that walked in originally. He was a lot more composed, more grounded, and way more powerful because he mastered himself in silence. That's the kind of reframe we're talking about. Because stillness, which once felt like a cage, ended up becoming the very thing that gave him his edge. And hey, listen, you don't have to be in prison for 27 years to master stillness. Because you can start right now in the middle of your own chaos, because it's not something that you wait for. It's something that you have to train for. So once you reframe stillness, you then have to have a system in place to start training daily. Now I'm going to walk you through this easy process to build that kind of inner power step by step. And I like to call it the N²S² Cheat Code. Notice, name, sit, surrender. So we can start with the first one, to notice. So as you sit down, no distractions, no to-do lists. This part is just you, your breath, and your body. That's it. And the goal is simple. Just observe what's coming up. Because let's be real, you can't control what you don't even notice. And most people go through their day on autopilot. They think they're in control, but really it's just their nervous system that's calling the shots. So while you're sitting there, just catch yourself. Where's your mind going? Is it already scattered, or is it jumping to the next thing? And hey, this part isn't about judgment. It's about your awareness. And then there's step 2. So now that you've noticed what's coming up, now you got to give it a name. And it's not a whole story. It's not some deep explanation. It's really just a simple word or even a phrase to just label what's showing up in your system. So anxiety, pressure, control, the urge to get up, the fear of falling behind. There's so many things you can name in this moment. And that's all you're doing here. Because the second you name it, you then start shrinking the hold it has on you. And you create a little bit of space between you and that actual reaction. And in that space right there, that's where you start to ground yourself. Whatever you're feeling, you can say to yourself silently, clearly, without any judgment. You're not trying to fight or get rid of it in this moment. You're just recognizing it so it doesn't have to run the show behind the scenes without your permission. So now that you've named what's rising, the next step is to sit with it. Not run from it, not distract yourself with a phone or a task. Just sit right there, upright, feet planted, your hands, a little bit relaxed, shoulders down, let it drop a little bit. And then bring your attention to your breath. You can inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for another 4, and then exhale for 6. That's your anchor. So you can see it as almost like a reset point. And every time your mind starts to drift off or, trying to figure something out, just gently bring it back to your breath. There's no pressure in this moment. Because if the urge to get up or to bail out gets strong, You don't have to fight it. You just have to say to yourself real calmly, not now. Because remember, stillness isn't about feeling calm right away. It's about choosing to stay even when you don't feel like it. Because the more you learn to sit through the discomfort, the more you start to build the real nervous system control you need. So now comes the final part, which is to surrender. So you've noticed, you've named, you sat with things. Now it's time to release that tight grip you got. Because this is usually where most people tend to tighten back up. Trying to force a result, trying to calm down on demand, or trying to do everything right. But here's the thing. The whole point of this practice is to stop trying so hard and just let the thoughts and the discomfort be there. Let whatever tension that needs to rise. And then just let it all exist without fighting it. Instead of trying to control the moment, what if you just trusted it? Let your nervous system know, hey, we're safe here and it's okay. And if you believe in something bigger than you, a higher power, this is your moment to sort of lean in and hand it over. Hand over the pressure, the fear, the constant feeling that you gotta do more or be more or prove more. You don't have to carry all that alone. And newsflash, you weren't built to. You can let go of the need of trying to fix it all, and in exchange, let the peace meet you exactly where you are. That's what stillness is really for. Not to try and be in control of everything, but just to remember who actually does. So that is your N²S² Calm Cheat Code. And you can do this every day for 5 to 10 minutes at a minimum. But over time, the goal is to start doing it for longer periods of time, uninterrupted. And that's all it takes to start rewiring your system to move from chaos to real mental clarity. Now, this state of being is not something that just stays on the mat or the chair you're sitting on. It has to follow you everywhere, especially in those moments where everything in you just wants to react. So what does that actually look like when the pressure hits and you need to start using that in real time? Here's a few examples of people who use this. And we can start with Steve Jobs, because he wasn't loud or all over the place. And most people described him as a person that took long pauses before he was answering any tough questions. And even when the pressure was high, like during a product launch or, a boardroom showdown, you could ask him something and they said he would just sit there, silent and totally unbothered. So in real time, here's the N²S² Cheat Code in practice. So the first thing is to notice. So he probably noticed that, the pressure to respond fast or defend his idea. And to name the feeling was probably a sense of ego or urgency that came up. But then keep in mind, he had to sit with those emotions. So he physically stayed still, took a breath, held his silence, and finally he surrendered, letting go of the need to impress and trusted his intuition to speak when he was ready. He knew that silence makes people lean in, and stillness sort of shifted the energy in the room. And it gave him control in the moment, because instead of reacting to it, Jobs used stillness to set the pace, slowing things down so his mind can stay sharp and intentional. And then there's Ronda Rousey, one of the baddest women to ever step foot in the UFC octagon. But her strength, it wasn't just being aggressive, because a lot of it came from how she'd sit still before the chaos. So right before a fight, while her opponents was all kind of like jumping around and burning up all that energy, Ronda was just standing there, still, her face was calm, and not a single move wasted. So putting that cheat code into practice, she first had to notice. She probably felt, her body ready to explode and her mind jumping ahead. And then she had to name those feelings, whether it was adrenaline or like a fight or flight moment. And after naming, she had to sit with it. So she grounded herself. No movement and focus on deep breathing. And finally, she surrendered, letting go of all the hype, the need to try and prove herself, and just executed. And at this point, she was a beast in the octagon because she was clocked in and she was ready. And that's the kind of power that comes from knowing exactly when to move and when to stay exactly where you are. And then there was Jesus. No throne, no armor, no fancy title, but just full of presence and full of authority. He didn't rush to defend himself when Pontius Pilate, asked him questions before the throne. He didn't flinch when the devil tried to test him. He wasn't chasing validation. He stayed still. Before making big decisions, he withdrew to quiet places to just be alone and connect with God. And that was him noticing. So catching the noise before it could cloud his clarity, he'd just sit with the weight of what was coming. And in that space, he named what he was feeling, stayed, and when it was time, he surrendered, not just to the moment, but to the will of the Father. He let go of the need to try and control the outcome, and he trusted in timing, trusted in his assignment, and trusted in the power behind him. And even in his final hours where everything around him was just chaos, he stayed composed. So you've seen how this plays out in multiple ways. Steve Jobs did it in the boardroom, Rhonda did it in the UFC octagon, and Jesus himself did it in front of crowds, courts, and at the cross. Now let's bring it back to you. Where is your arena? The spot where you tend to react too fast, or overthink, or jump in too soon, or shrink a little bit. Maybe it's the sales calls, or when somebody challenges you, or the pressure to perform when you're running on fumes. That's when you need to implement that calm cheat code in regular, everyday life. Stillness isn't about playing small. It's really about grounding yourself so that way those emotions don't yank you around. So the next time that you're in a situation, pause, breathe, apply that cheat code, and then watch the next video to help you on your journey. You don't have to do this alone. Until next time.